Hello. Yes, you read the title right. The most disgusting, repulsive, physically nauseating, and most disturbing book I've ever read. And I really don't say that lightly. I will read any and every horror-adjacent book I can get my grubby little hands on, but this one takes the cake for the worst of the worst. Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bastarrica. It was originally published in Spanish in 2017 under the title Cadaver Exquisito. As you can tell, I'm 100% fluent in Spanish, so I totally pronounced that right. That's sarcastic, by the way. Anyways, the story follows our main character Marcos, who is the head of his meat slaughterhouse. Except this plant isn't in charge of slaughtering cows, not chickens or pigs, not even goats or sheep. This processing plant breeds, raises, and slaughters human beings. Well, kind of. Because they're not really humans, are they? Let's start at the beginning. But don't worry, there won't be any spoilers. Also, I put a lot of work into these videos, so consider liking or subscribing. That would help me out. You see, just a few short years earlier, Marcus's world was just the same as ours. Hamburgers and tacos were filled with cows and chickens, milk and cheese came from cows and goats, and nearly every household had a domesticated four-legged friend inside. But that all changed after the transition. The transition started when a deadly virus spread around the globe, infecting every species of animal it came in contact with. And I know that sort of sounds familiar, but remember, this book was written in 2017, not 2020. Either way, your dogs, cats, and the birds outside your window, the fish in the sea, the mice in the streets, they are all infected by this virus now. To keep the safety of the people, every animal on the face of the planet was eradicated. Everything that moved had a bullet through its skull before it could chirp, squeal, meow, or moo. A small band of human resistors couldn't bear to say goodbye to their beloved pets. They tried to hoard them away, keep them safe from the officers and their guns, but they all failed. But in this new world without animals, what are we supposed to eat? The newspapers featured headlines calling the virus the vegan's revenge, and unsurprisingly, people didn't take well to it. Maybe that's why we all just looked away when immigrants and other lower class citizens just started to disappear. And only a few months later, the government introduced special meat. Special meat isn't like normal meat, as its name suggests. It doesn't come from an animal, it comes from a human. When people realized this, they were rightfully upset at first, but we need meat to survive, right? And everything comes at a cost, and these people being slaughtered aren't even civilized. You can barely even call them human. The human cattle have their vocal cords cut out as children. They're shaved completely bald and have no clothes. They have no language and no name and no families. They're only numbers in a bigger picture. They're so far away from being real people, the government even banned calling them that. They're called heads now instead. It wasn't long before people accepted this change. People had their real meat back, and even milk and cheese. And who can live without cheese? This is where our story starts, with Marcos and his job at one of these new processing plants. Marcos is a lonely man with an ailing father who's suffering from dementia. His own wife has left him and his son has died, leaving his home an empty shell of what it used to be. And he seems to be the only one who has a problem with eating human beings. What goes on in his job disgusts him, and if he could leave it, he would, but he can't. Humans being branded with heated irons, females hooked up to milking machines, and dead bodies hung upside down with slit throats. In the midst of this all, Marcos is suddenly given a female. She has no name, none of the heads do, only a branded logo into her skin right across her forehead. Alone with this female, tied up in a shed, it's completely up to Marcos what to do with her now. And I won't give off anything more than that. It's up to you to read the rest now. Without any spoilers though, I would like to discuss some of the themes in this book. The author does an outstanding job of commenting on so many of the issues in society nowadays. This includes misogyny, capitalism, consumerism, discrimination, and animal exploitation. The heads are treated as less than, they're subhuman, and aren't deserving of living in a society. This blatant dehumanization is used to justify the violence and discrimination against them, which, holy moly, has been and still is used in the real world. It shows just how indifferent society as a whole can be towards vulnerable groups that are considered less than, like when murder or assault towards prostitutes is swept under the rug by law enforcement. Same towards people living in poverty, indigenous women, and just women in general. For the large majority of society, it's just too easy to look away. We can also see this happen in history during the Holocaust and legalized slavery. People who are considered subhuman are exploited, and the rest of the world does nothing to stop it. And one of the easiest ways to sweep these issues out of sight and out of mind is through our language. Immigrants are referred to as illegals, disabled people are cripples, people of color are N-words, and sex workers are prostitutes or whores. As soon as these words are attached to an individual, it's so much easier for our brains to dismiss all the systemic issues they're facing. This is reflected in the book when the human cattle are called heads. How something is referred to fundamentally changes how we perceive it, and calling a human a head can be the difference between your pitchfork in the air for mutiny or your fork on your plate for dinner. People likely would be much more uncomfortable having dinner and eating a human being if it was called that, but the word head allows them to disconnect from that. Language is power, which is another reason why the heads have their vocal cords cut out. This is used to deprive them of language. Without language, the heads are defenseless and can't speak up for themselves or their rights. Another point I'd like to bring up is the topic of animal exploitation and animal abuse. I watched like 1.5 other reviews on this book, and oh my god, I would just like to say I did not know there were so many out there. But of the reviews I did see, none of them mentioned animal rights like at all. And wow, if you finish this book without readjusting your look towards the current factory farming of animals in the real world, I'm sorry, but you read the book a little bit wrong. The heads in the book are treated terribly, and their quality of life is abhorrent. Everything that happens to these heads happens in the real world too, to animals in the agricultural industry. I personally believe that, hey, if you think it's wrong to treat a human being like this, then maybe it's wrong to treat any other kind of sentient being like this too. I think that completely skipping over the topic of animal abuse when reviewing this book is very intentional. So, like, don't do that, please. Yeah, how does cognitive dissonance feel? Anyways, Augustina Bastarrica, the author herself, is vegan and has been since 2005. In an interview, she said she never wrote the book to try and convince people to convert to veganism.
You're a vegan now.
But I'm not sure if I believe that. If I weren't vegan, this book would make me do a pretty good job of making me rethink my ways. My guess is that she was advised by her team to not state that her book promotes veganism because, as we've seen countless times, there is an extremely large anti-vegan bias out there. A common argument you will hear among the vegan community is, how would you like it if you were bred and slaughtered for your meat? And we see sentiments extremely similar to this everywhere. I was taught the golden rule in kindergarten, which is to treat others the way you want to be treated. If you ask a group of people if they follow this ideology, I'm guessing a majority of them would say yes. But if you ask that same group of people if they support an industry that breeds, tortures, slaughters over 80 billion land mammals every single year, most of them will probably say yes again. It's easy for most people to think of farm animals being murdered and just not care. After all, they're only pigs, only cows, only chickens. They're only heads. They're only prostitutes and cripples, right? Now. I'm not saying that if you eat meat, you think all marginalized groups are undeserving of basic human rights, or that you would eat another human being if it ever came to it. That's not what I'm saying. I just think that if you're avoiding confronting the tragedies that come with factory farms just because it makes you uncomfortable, you're kind of missing a major point of the book. This book is supposed to make you question your world views. You should be uncomfortable. And being so defensive to where you're unable to look at our world with an open mind can really make you miss out on important opportunities. You should be uncomfortable. That's what's needed to look at our world and want to make changes for the better. Anyways, that was heavy. Sorry. Let's take a minute to talk about this speed paint in the background. This piece was sort of my reintroduction to Ibis paint. I've been drawing only traditionally for like the past almost year, and I just have on and off phases with digital art. You know, like the last time I regularly was drawing digitally was for Art Fight, and that was all the way back in like June, July. Of all the years I've been using Ibis Paint, I still don't really know how to use it, and I just don't use a lot of the functions because they seem complicated. So I tried to go a bit out of my comfort zone for this piece and play around with the colors and like the filters and stuff, and just parts of the program I'm not familiar with. Like this drawing was the first time I figured out how to add a reference to the Ibis Paint program, but like not on the canvas, like have it on a separate window. I didn't know that was a thing. I probably could have used that before, but Now I know I'm very bad with backgrounds and sceneries for pieces. Usually I just have like a white background and a character in the middle, so this was really out of my comfort zone. But overall, I do think I'm happy with how it turned out. I think it's cool. I think it's cool. All right, that's the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. I'm really curious if anyone else has actually read this book, so I would love to hear your thoughts if you have, and comment using a cow emoji down below so I know you watched the whole video. Any tips for drawing on ibis paint or just drawing tips in general are super duper duper appreciated. Thank you for watching again, and I sincerely hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye now.